I don't know what we would have done without Michael Ackerfeld.
Like, metal would have stayed lame. Or like
And just like there's not a lot of metal where it's okay to like have feelings, you know what I mean? And like Opeth were, I had never heard a band where they were like, it's okay to be angry and sad. I guess, at least at the time, that was like revolutionary to me.
Most of the new metal bands were angry and sad and trying to deal with it.
I was gonna say Maynard. Maynard had a little bit of it in Tool. I think they started it.
That was the thing that the earlier waves of metal didn't like about those singers, is that they talk about it. One thing that I always thought was sad is something that Lars Ulrich said once. One time when he was really, really drunk, James Hetfield told me he loved me. And I don't think he's ever said that to like anybody because he's so repressed.
The thing about Opeth is, unlike the new metal bands,
Yeah.
They were angry and sad and could play their instruments.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
there you go.
they were angry and sad and not dumb.
No, they got some good rhythm sections in there, man.
And there will always be a place in my heart for Korn. And the 2 times I've seen them live, they put on a great show.
Yeah.
I did have a realization listening to the new Tool album that I kind of have the Zeppelin problem with them, where like I still like the band, I still like musically what's happening. Adam Jones hasn't really developed as a musician at all.
He's a big wrestling fan.
I will.
Yes,
so it does tie into this podcast.
Yeah.
But I realized Maynard, to me, the difference between how I felt about Maynard when I was younger and how I feel about him now is sort of like there was this guy, Doc. I'm going to tell you this story because Ben's going to figure out who I'm talking about very quickly. There was this guy that when we were in high school, and he was in his 20s, and he kind of had this like acid guru act. This was before Burning Man was like in the popular consciousness, but I think he was like in that kind of zone. And he had this whole like, and we all totally bought it, bought it to varying degrees.
It was kind of wise. Well, also, he was giving us free acid, so
yeah, exactly, yeah. This 25-year-old giving a bunch of 16-year-olds free acid, and like he would fuck up one of us every now and then. And then now, when you look back on that, you realize like, oh, that guy is not cool. That guy is the opposite of cool. That guy should be in jail.
That guy is a child predator and a drug distributor to kids.
And that is a little bit how I feel about Maynard.
But the acid trips were still dope, right?
I mean, yeah.
Just like the Tool album.
Made a huge impact on who I am.
There was a very close connection between Tool albums and acid trips for us in high school.
Oh, yeah.
As well.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. And I haven't done acid in years, and it was hard to get into the new Tool album. You're listening to Contesting Wrestling, the podcast where the 3 of us are old friends and we put our friendship to the test by arguing about the validity of professional wrestling as an art form. That's not really it. It's really more of an attempt to understand things. I try to understand what it is that is so alluring about professional wrestling, and they sort of acknowledge my frustrations. And that's served us pretty well so far, I think.
And try to point to the things that we find valuable that you might have missed.
Yes, yeah, and that is true, because there's got to be something that I'm not getting, because a lot of people that I have known and respected in my life are super fucking into wrestling. My name is Evan Burke. I'm a writer. And I generally don't care for wrestling, but we've been doing it for a little while, and I'm starting to get some things. I'm starting to see, my brain is starting to get some Stockholm Syndrome.
I am Dr. Ben Abelson. I am a professor of philosophy at Mercy College, and I fucks with wrestling.
And my name is Doc Diamondfire. I've been involved with wrestling for over 10 years now. I do ring announcing, I do commentary, I do wrestling, I do a little bit of it all. And I've known these guys just as they have known me for about 20 years. Evan, I think something that has surprised you a little bit is that we have validated most of your complaints, because most of your actual complaints are things that wrestling fans complain about all the time. This doesn't make sense. This match is boring. Why aren't they doing anything? Like, this isn't what we want,
And yet that has only deepened my confusion, I will say. Because when you're like, this thing is bad, and someone's like, yes, it is.
I mean, really, you've been on other scenes before.
I know.
People just complain about the art forms that they love.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't like that, but it's true.
But one thing that Evan has seemed to have universally appreciated in his watching of wrestling has been the great Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels.
So, yeah, I have a giant man crush on Shawn Michaels. I was thinking about how if I have this huge crush on Shawn Michaels, a character who is played as rather deliberately, not androgynous, but he is simultaneously, in a way that was very popular in American culture in the 1980s, he is portrayed as simultaneously possibly gay and definitely effeminate, but also someone who is like 24/7 out there fucking the ladies, and sort of with like it's a David Lee Roth, just a gigolo sort of persona that he's got. But I'm like, if I have this giant crush on Shawn Michaels, then it stands to reason some percentage of the wrestling fandom also did.
So,
right?
I just want to insert here. I'm going to show Evan now the picture of Shawn Michaels in Playgirl wearing only the WWF Championship belt, strategically placed.
Wow.
You could look into that a little more later. if you
I
want.
will.
Yeah. And actually, when Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels were feuding over this, and Shawn Michaels was like the degenerate, bucking all the rules and whatever, and telling people to suck it and whatever. And Bret was standing up for family values and traditional this and that, whatever. Bret like straight up called Michaels out for doing the Playgirl thing and said, "I don't think that's a magazine for girls. I think that's a gay magazine." So unfortunately, despite my love for the Bret Hart character, there was this moment of homophobia that really stands out as quite a awful blemish.
Well, and also I would also venture a guess that the entire aspect of Michael's character that could be interpreted as gay and or effeminate, or which in the 80s in pop culture was the same thing. I would argue that it was always presented as a homophobic thing. It definitely is there to make you, make you not like Shawn Michaels. What I'm saying is like now in 2019, I can talk about, we can talk about this, and I can be like, oh yeah, I totally had a crush on Shawn Michaels. And I'm just saying, I definitely bet 10% of the wrestling audience actively had one, and 20 to 30% were like, Shawn Michaels makes me think about stuff that I don't like to think about when he's on screen. I don't want to get into this.
Man.
Well, and at the time they also had Gold Dust on TV. And we'll talk about that which was specifically designed to confuse and make uncomfortable the fan base in their loins.
Evan, though, you are completely right. Shawn Michaels is considered one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, especially if you consider just his in-ring like bell-to-bell skills, and if you consider his out-of-the-ring like promo and charisma skills. Like, there's an argument that can be made that he's the best.
Him being attractive is like reason like number 80 that I'm even in. It's the he's like the Buster Keaton of wrestling to me.
Yeah,
like he's
yeah.
like, it's like the way that he inhabits his physical character, the way that he sells, the combination of sort of the cool high flying acrobatic stuff. It's also just like I don't really get bored watching his matches,
Right.
which has been true of pretty much everybody else so far that I'm watching. And there have been moments where I get bored in his matches, but so far all of his matches that I've seen, I am on board all throughout all of them to at least some degree.
So for this episode, we watched, first of all, as our good match, Shawn Michaels wrestling Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 21. This was a Raw versus SmackDown match. Shawn representing Raw and Angle representing SmackDown. And then for the bad match, we watched Shawn Michaels challenging Diesel for the WWF Championship at WrestleMania 11.
Yeah, no, that second match, it's like, it's not really a bad match, but it's what I like to call a bad Shawn Michaels match, where,
where Shawn Michaels' amazing physical genius can only carry some schmuck so far.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
pretty
Shawn,
much.
and if you know what you're looking for, Shawn lets you know it. But let's not get too far into that yet. Let's go on to our first match. Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle, considered one of the greatest matches of all time. It was a benchmark when it happened.
So a little bit of backstory. Shawn Michaels had retired in 1998 due to back injuries. He had surgery. He was out. He started a wrestling school. He got clean because he was also, I think he was more a drug addict than it was his back problems, actually, that put him out in 98.
My back hurts so much from hauling around all the drugs I take every day.
And Diesel.
He was quite a pill man. Yes, and Diesel.
Hauling around Diesel's ass, which we'll talk about later. But so Sean became a born-again Christian. Got all into Jesus.
You mean if I convert, like, everyone will just forgive me for being such a shithead for all the time?
Well,
yes, John. Oh, I'm in. Yeah.
Well, pretty much as Doc, as you have put it many times in the past.
Yeah.
Sean had to believe in a power greater than himself,
right?
in order to not destruct completely.
He had never done that before.
So around when was this that he converted?
Sometime between 98 and 02. He comes back in November of 02, suddenly cured of his horrible back problem and better than he had ever been.
Yeah, and like straight as an arrow. There weren't like Shawn Michaels relapses. There weren't any stories of him like going crazy on airplanes.
August of 02, rather, he came back.
It was just he came back and he was the greatest wrestler in the world again somehow, and proceeded to have like just he had like the match of the year like 6 years in a row or something like that. His run in the 2000s is just ridiculous.
When did he retire?
Like finally retire? What was the year that he finally went out?
I want to say 2013.
Yeah, maybe.
And he started like early 90s?
He started in the mid 80s.
Oh,
When
wow.
he first started, be like the early to mid 80s. Him and Marty Jannetty were a tag team called the Rockers. I believe they started teaming in 85.
Something like that. Yeah, so he's from San Antonio, Texas. He was trained by a guy named Super Sock Jose Lothario. He got into wrestling and started this tag team, originally the Midnight Rockers in the territories in the old AWA. Eventually they got picked up by the WWF and just shortened their name to the Rockers. And they were possibly the most popular tag team ever at that point. One of the most popular tag teams in history.
Yeah. They never won the titles. They were going to win the titles one night.
They actually taped them winning the titles.
Yeah, but it's an interesting case of a match where the ring broke. The top rope kind of broke off at the turnbuckle or something, and they just do the match around that, and they decide they can't broadcast that. They'll leave the titles on the previous champions, and they'll just do the title change again later, and then they never did.
So they just had to pretend like it never happened, even though an arena of people saw it. They kept it under wraps. There was no internet, you know?
Yeah, I guess you could just do that back then.
Yeah, it was like 91 maybe. You know, and then the Rockers split up. Shawn Michaels got his like sexy boy persona happening, and the rest is history.
That's him singing his theme song.
That
right?
was the second version. The original one, Sensational Sherry, who was his manager, sang it in the third person, saying, he's my sexy boy. And then once they broke up as a unit, he re-recorded it from the first person.
Cool. He cannot sing.
She was a better singer, not by that much, but a better singer.
I would say also there is a second piece of backstory, at least for us personally, in this, is that this episode came about largely because after the two-parter on Hogan, I was like, I need to watch something good. I need to watch something that I enjoy with wrestlers that I enjoy in it. And the guys were like, okay, well, we can do something with Shawn Michaels. And then, Doc, you had a memory that I did not share of us, like high in Ben's room sometime in, 15 years ago. And you remembered me enjoying Kurt Angle.
Yeah. I seem to remember you being like, that guy's something. And I get that from a lot of people, actually, who weren't big wrestling fans, because Kurt Angle had something about him that it seemed like a lot more real, because it was. He's a legitimate Olympic gold medalist.
This is a delightful character.
Yeah.
Like,
that was the real surprise. Like, they knew he was going to be good at wrestling because he was an Olympic wrestler, but the fact that he took so quickly to the character part of it was really amazing.
Well, because there's two things. One, he looks like a putty golem. Like, he looks like
as he puts it, someone when he came up to him like first day of school once and was like, Kurt Angle, you look like a thumb.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I was gonna say like maybe like if you like melted a Stretch Armstrong a little bit, sort of in that vein. But it's also, it seems like the core of his character is that it's dumb for him to not win.
Yes.
Like, you should be upset if he doesn't win, because that's obviously what should happen. It's like it's entitlement, backed up by reality.
Yeah, a
And-
dangerous combination.
Yeah, like how do you? I
know,
mean, that's genius.
He's the ultimate last boss that comes out after you beat the last boss and casts one spell and kills you, and then goes like pathetic and goes back into his cave.
He does look like a Dark Souls boss.
And that's the amazing thing about him as a wrestler is he's simultaneously able to convince you, because it's not hard, because he can do it, that he can beat anybody, but also that his opponent somehow has a chance.
Which is important in wrestling, because like it's cool to watch somebody just completely destroy another guy for a few minutes, but like that's not sustainable.
It's the same problem with Brock Lesnar and also with Ronda Rousey. Like, they have to figure out how to make this look like anything like a legitimate contest when you know full well they can definitely kill all of these people without even trying.
Now, like other wrestlers, they're not going to have like an Olympic level of training
Yeah.
like he did in classical wrestling, but is it safe to assume all wrestlers are like at least pretty good at classical wrestling to some degree?
Well, it depends. You know, one way to get into wrestling is to start doing amateur wrestling, but the two are very different. If you train to be a pro wrestler, you'll learn to do some things that amateur wrestlers do. But amateur wrestling, like Greco-Roman wrestling and freestyle wrestling, are two games with very specific rule sets, and you have to play to those rules. And you don't necessarily learn those rules a lot and how to play around them when you're training to be a pro wrestler. You can a little, but it's not that much of a prerequisite.
I think the advantage that amateur wrestling gives is more just that you're used to that level of training.
Yeah, body control, too, for every part of your body.
Because there is nothing harder than training for amateur wrestling, I think, and like having to cut weight to like get to the right division where you can dominate and stuff. It's a brutal, brutal culture.
So Kurt Angle is a very interesting case as an amateur wrestler. He won the gold medal. He was never one to cut weight. His strategy was always, well, I'm just going to be the weight that like I naturally am and train as hard as possible. And then my opponents will cut weight to get to my weight and they'll be tired. And then I'll beat them on points. I probably won't pin a lot of people, but you win the match by points after a few rounds. He won the gold medal on points by outlasting everyone else. With a broken neck, I might add.
Yes, with
What?
a broken freaking neck, as he likes to say.
Yeah.
Wait, he won.
So he
won-
had a broken neck at the Olympics.
Okay,
He-
I'm gonna grab my coffee. You keep telling the story because
Okay.
I left it in the other room.
You do what you got to do. So he was wrestling, you know, and somebody threw him, and he put an arm out to break his fall, so that he didn't land on his back, like land on his shoulders, but he was still rotating, so his arm couldn't do it. So he put out his head to angle his body away from his shoulders landing on the mat, and he broke his neck. And you know, he was still competing, and like the trainers, he says, like the trainers were there massaging me and like the pulling my neck and cracking on it and everything, which he totally shouldn't have been doing. But he wanted to keep going. They were at the Olympics, and like nothing that they could do to help he could do, because like he would take a cortisone shot to help with the swelling, but cortisone is a steroid, and he wouldn't be able to continue competing if he put that in there. So he just was like, well, I'm at the Olympics, and just kept wrestling. And he won. He won the 1996 heavyweight gold medal. As a heavyweight, I believe he was 185 pounds when the weight limit is like 220. I could be wrong on those numbers. I'm not that much of an expert on amateur wrestling, but yeah, he's a freakishly incredible athlete. When they asked him, like, were you thrilled that you finally won the gold medal? He said, no, I was relieved. I didn't have to do that again. You know?
So it was less that like, oh, now I'm injured, I can't do this anymore. It was just like, I won the gold medal, I'm done. I'm done with it. It's time to do a different thing.
When you win a gold medal in a sport like wrestling, and really when you win a gold medal at all, you have a few options ahead of you. One of those options is continue training and try and win another one in 4 years. Then that's a whole activity path. He didn't want to do that. That's fine. Most people don't do that in wrestling unless you're like a super heavyweight.
A couple other things about Angle. For one, I think by the time that he has this match with Michaels, he's had a few neck surgeries. He had several over the course
He
of
had a
his
few
career.
neck surgeries, yes.
Looks like he has built up a layer of muscle around his neck. Like, I mean, he does
Certainly.
not skip neck day.
That's what you do, yeah,
Yeah.
when you're wrestling with a broken neck. The other thing is, all of the male members of his family, or like many of them, died of this like freak heart condition in their early 30s or something like that when they were fairly young. So he grew up with this sense that like I could die at any time. I have to be like as accomplished as much as I can and be as great as I can in the time that I have. Thankfully, he's still alive now. I think he's surpassed the age at which a lot of the male members of his family died.
So for him, it really was like, I've completed amateur wrestling.
Yeah.
And I have all of these wrestling skills. There is only one place left for me to go and also conquer. And then I'm sure there must have been a little bit of, you know, man, like, I win a fucking gold medal. I train so hard. Like, maybe some people know who I am, but, like, everybody knows who these motherfuckers are. I could do this shit. I could come out there and yell and, like, do all this. And he does it so well.
He does it
like,
so well.
Funny story, in the interim between the Olympics and the WWF, he considered joining ECW, which was popular at the time. So he goes down to ECW, and they do a storyline where they crucify one of the wrestlers. They, like, put on a crown of barbed wire instead of a crown of thorns, and, like, they, you know, crucify him. And Angle saw this and objected to it. I'm not exactly sure how religious he is or whatever, but
you don't have to be that religious to object to actual crucifixion.
He's found it
religious.
He found it distasteful.
He's fairly religious. I believe he's a Catholic, but he's not like, he doesn't push it on you. But like if you hear interviews with him, he'll thank God 100 times every time he says something that caused him not to die.
I mean, I generally think great wrestlers kind of have to believe in God in order to take the risks that they do.
Oh yeah.
They have to think someone's looking out for them. But the funny thing was, what Angle really objected to is when he came up to Paul Heyman, the guy who ran ECW, and was like, hey, what the hell was that? And Heyman was like, oh, I had no idea they were going to do that. And Angle was like, you have no idea what the wrestlers are going to do out there? You have no control over that? I don't want any part of that.
Yeah, and if you put me on any part of this show today, you're going to hear from my lawyers. I'm not going to have that represent me. I'm an American hero, and that's that. Yeah, when he first was approached by the WWE, as people have said, one of the problems is that he didn't know really much about pro wrestling, and he was like, well, I can't ever lose matches, right? And they had to teach him that, no, you're going to have to eventually lose some matches. But it's interesting you say, like, everybody knows these guys. That was the story as presented before this match, where Kurt Angle's side of the story anyway. I won the gold medal in 96, but all people are talking about is Shawn Michaels. This guy is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. And I'm like, I'm the gold medalist over here. I'm the wrestler.
Not that many people were talking about Shawn Michaels, though. WWF was not particularly popular during that period,
but more people were talking about Shawn Michaels than were talking about Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle.
Yes,
I had never heard of him.
Yeah.
No.
This match starts. Shawn Michaels comes out dressed in a costume that, if you found like Liberace's lost cameo from Hellraiser 2, that's kind of the genre he's in. And then when Kurt Angle comes out, Kurt Angle is not dressed up fancy at all, but Kurt Angle's like, he is the most decorated athlete in the WWE and has one of the strangest face ratios.
Yeah.
He's got a big face.
Did you notice what the crowd was doing during his entrance along to his music?
It wasn't kind, right? They were like,
you suck. You suck. They would do that baby face, heel, whatever.
Yeah.
He loved it.
It became a real term of endearment for him. These days, he'll come out as like old-timer Kurt Angle in a suit, and he'll point at the crowd like, you suck, and the other side, you suck. It's great. It's great when that kind of thing can happen. And he had the sense of humor to get it. Kurt Angle's debut in the WWF was like, everybody knew he was going to be a big heel except him. Because he thought, I'm going to be the character, right?
Yeah.
He thought, well, I'm the gold medalist.
He had the three eyes: integrity, intelligence, and
Intensity. And so he comes out for his first match, and he's doing some wrestling, and then like there were some vignettes that didn't ingratiate him to the audience because he's just talking about how great he was, which was very not in vogue in 2000 or 99 or whenever it was. And as the story goes, he's in the ring, and the crowd is starting to boo him, and he gets the message from the referee, who has an earpiece. go get the microphone and tell the crowd not to boo you. And he's like, well, that's what the boss is saying. So he gets to the crowd and he says, hey, you don't boo an Olympic gold medalist, which made everybody boo so much more. And that was the genesis of his character right there. Because he's such a dangerous man. And he's also like, he's arrogant, but he's like goofy, funny, arrogant. He's like, I'm the best.
Well, it's hard to take him entirely seriously because he seems kind of ridiculous.
Even when he's saying the worst shit he can possibly think of, which he did when he was really trying hard to be a heel later in his career.
And it wasn't working. People loved him too much.
So this match seemed to me like it really played to the strengths of the two wrestlers because Kurt Angle is really good at looking like a gorilla throwing a tantrum, and Shawn Michaels is really good at looking like he's getting hurt. And so this was basically about Kurt Angle just flying into a rage and doing as much damage to Shawn Michaels as he possibly could, and Shawn Michaels just selling and bouncing around and just like flopping. So much flopping. He does like he could have been a break dancer, like in the way he's like doing the worm half the time.
Interestingly, at the beginning of the match, they kind of play each other's game. So Shawn kind of out chain wrestles Kurt Angle for a little while, and then Angle's the one to bring it to the outside and like throw Shawn around out there.
It seems like there is on one level they are playing to the characters of Kurt Angle is doing all of this like technical traditional gold medal stuff.
Yeah.
And Michaels is jumping around and doing more unorthodox things that are more the kind of moves you would associate with professional wrestling, almost like he's rubbing it in Angle's face like, haha, I'm this style of wrestler. There comes a point a little bit later where it feels like I maybe was projecting this because it's a good story, but it felt like Angle was starting to do some more what you would think of as WWF style things, and Michaels was also really trying to show like I am a technical wrestler as well. I also know these holds and can do can do all that same shit.
They both had very deep bags of tricks, so they know when to pull out what. But as technical as they both were, I think my favorite moment is when Kurt Angle picks up Shawn Michaels onto his shoulders and just throws him at the ring post outside. He picks him up, turns around a little bit, and then just heaves him.
On Michaels' dives and stuff, the first one he does a crossbody off the top rope to the outside of the ring, and if you look close, he kind of trips for a second and is about to fuck up, and amazingly just fixes it in the air and still hits him perfectly.
Nails it.
It's like when you're playing a platformer and you can jump and then move around while you're in the air in open defiance of God and physics.
Double jump.
Yeah, that's Shawn Michaels has a double jump.
Yeah.
Except by now it wasn't in defiance of God.
Yeah, no,
it was
God
in
gave.
God.
You know what? Yes. Now I'm gonna have to be Catholic again. My grandmother will be very happy to hear this because I need that double jump, and that's how you unlock it. I'm not going to be able to get to the second half of the castle if I don't develop the double jump.
Gotta develop a double jump.
I'd like to point out, I don't know if we should keep this on the thing, but I will see how Evan feels about it. I'd like to point out an inadvertently hilarious line that Doc would reference back in the day a lot, where JR says that Shawn is reaching down into places that men don't have.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah,
like at the moment, Jim Ross is just trying to come up with a way to portray Shawn's emotional state. He's been talking for 3 hours at WrestleMania. Like Shawn Michaels is reaching down into places that men don't have. It's
like whose places is he reaching down into?
Where is that,
or
Jim?
does he have places that you wouldn't normally associate with a man?
So yeah, like this is either that Shawn Michaels is some sort of some sort of an Uber man who has places that other men don't have, or he's trying to say that Shawn Michaels is not a man and is insulting him in that way, but then also at the same time, like if he's calling Shawn Michaels a woman, he's also openly admitting, well, women have these reserves of strength that they can reach down into that men don't have, so also it still doesn't work. And if he does mean it positive, you know what I mean? I guess if he means it positively.
Or it could just mean that Shawn's fingering himself.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the hottest interpretation, certainly.
Well, Shawn certainly had reserves of energy in this match. Him and Kurt Angle just do incredible things to each other. When the whole point of Angle's strategy is to get Shawn back into that ankle lock. The ankle lock is an interesting move in pro wrestling. It's a very legitimate hold. And when people started doing it in pro wrestling, they started doing it. MMA fighters would do it in the birth of MMA in pro wrestling, and fans would be like, why is he holding his foot? But once people started getting educated to the fact that it's such a good hold, everyone came around. And it was Kurt Angle's primary finishing move was the ankle lock. And he got Shawn in it over and over and over again. And Shawn always either rolled through or grabbed the ropes. And they did multiple spots where Shawn would roll through and Angle would just hold onto it. And the finish finally came when Shawn tapped out. And the whole finishing sequence with just them in the hold, I think, is brilliant. Shawn acts like he's trapped in a bear trap.
Did you think he was going to tap, Evan?
I genuinely didn't know.
Yeah.
I genuinely didn't know how this was going to play out.
Yeah.
I was really, especially there was a point, every time I started to get bored, they would do something interesting. Like right before Angle lifted him and threw him, in like the 30 seconds before that, I was like starting to drift and be like, all right, like where are we going with this?
Yeah.
And then I especially Kurt Angle gets so mad. He
That
looks
point where he's like choking him.
His head turns completely orange and he starts steaming from his ears.
In a art form where everybody is angry all the time and everybody is shouting, and even like at the very beginning of this match, like the promo started and it was like, Shawn Michaels, and I was like, oh, it would be really great if wrestling could fucking just not yell at me for a minute. But even for all of that, Kurt Angle seems so much angrier than everybody else. And it's once again, it's that impetuous, like, no, I should not be losing. This is an injustice.
Yeah.
This is an undoing of reality that I am being made to lose.
That I
to
haven't
this
already
charlatan.
beaten you.
And like he looks so shocked. Like at one point, he's got Michaels in a hold, and Michaels turns around and just kicks him just right in the gold medals, in this like just open like, oh, you think you're so fucking hot? And he looks both in incredible pain and also just like so mad. He's like, I can't believe he just kicked me in the balls.
Like, I can't believe he hit. I should be able to defend that because I'm the greatest.
Oh, and then there's a bit where Michaels is on the ropes and then Angle gets behind him and they're fucking. They're stone
Definitely
cold fucking. This just supports my man crush theory, and just that the whole thing plays into the erotic undertones that are present for all wrestling fans, whether or not they acknowledge that.
It's up until recent history and the advent of Joey Ryan and Don Chocodino and so on. I do think that the Kurt Angle attempting and failing to German suplex somebody from the apron to the floor, especially when he could get like a good deep back bend on it sometimes, was some of the gayer moments in wrestling history. And yeah, there is a sense of homoeroticism across the wrestling industry. And if anybody says there isn't, they're in denial.
Well,
Come on, man.
And that's why, like, I'm harping on the Shawn Michaels man crush thing, not just because of my own fascination with it, but also like because it has to play a role. It has to play a role for every wrestling fan, because I am always so fascinated by it, because wrestling is always presented as such a traditionally masculine environment, and you really get the feeling that historically most of the guys involved with wrestling have been guys who would have also been extremely homophobic. And it's so gay in a way that is, that like now that I'm older and like you're not as hung up on anything anymore, and it's like, and it's nice and it's nice to see like in shape, attractive people doing all kinds of cool physical stuff. But the fact that I guess I'm endlessly fascinated by what role that eroticism has to play for wrestling fans, because it has to be omnipresent.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if part of the idea in having a character like Shawn Michaels is, the WWF guys being like, well, there are a lot of closeted dudes who watch this and they want to have some kind of outlet for their feelings, and this is a nicely veiled, packaged kind of way to do that. Sure.
And then the WWF also famously had, gay men high in their creative team, and they would know what the gay community would like. I think. And Shawn Michaels is it.
Yeah.
Or was it at the time, anyway.
Yeah, and I guess let's see where else do I have down
Shawn's
here?
increasingly sharp comb over and increasingly lazy eye these days, I think, isn't making him the
Comb
one
over,
with that.
he's completely bald now.
Which
No,
I gotta
completely.
say,
Right.
in today's bad match, which takes place many years before this match,
Yes.
Michaels is not as good, arguably because he's younger and less experienced. But I would argue he was sustaining too many hair levels in the Diesel match. By the time we get to the Angle match, he's slimmed down to only 2 or 3 hair levels, whereas
Yes.
he's sustaining like 6.
Well, he's still full on mullet in 1995.
I mean, look, if
wrestling
you-
had not progressed much at the time.
I mean, and I get it. Mullets are helpful for wrestling because you can have long hair without it getting in your face. But they figured out better ways of doing that
Yeah.
since then.
The-
Jenny McCarthy and Pam Anderson. I think we
Oh.
need to comment on all of that.
Yeah, well, it's funny that this match starts, and it's both so 90s, so everybody involved.
Out
it's-
comes Jonathan Taylor Thomas,
Oh,
ladies
oh
and
my God! All right,
gentlemen.
so I'm watching this. Okay, so I'm watching this. I am watching this with who was at the time of this match
Yeah.
super hot for JTT.
I'm not surprised.
Because she was a girl in America between the age of 9 and 12 at this
Yeah,
time, so
and-
she was fucking hot for JTT. And she was like, "This is really weird. I haven't really thought about him much since this period of time, and it's weird to see a child actor like at the time
Yeah.
that you were hot for them."
I'm sure she doesn't want to say, "Oh man, he was hot." Oh, he's 13.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, that's not. Well, it was kind of like when I was 10 and I saw The Professional with Natalie Portman,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was like appropriate for me to be attracted to her. And then years later, I saw that movie again, and I was like, the guy who made this movie should be in jail because this is a movie that heavily sexualizes a 12-year-old.
But
Yes.
JTT is also such a little twerp. It's like I think especially with like boy heartthrobs, there's this thing like if you ever saw Pen 15, the Hulu show.
And I keep meaning to watch it. I've heard it's great.
So it's about junior high school, and the 2 leads, female leads, are played by women in their 30s or 20s or 30s who are playing junior high school students, but everyone else around them is actually of junior high school age. So the boys they have crushes on are these little fucking twerps, and it's just totally ridiculous. Oh my God, he's so hot, and he looks like fucking
yeah.
JTT did.
But the thing that I think was funniest about it is like they come out and there's JTT, Whack Totoro, whatever,
Yes,
John
yes.
Totoro's brother nobody cares about.
Well, he was on NYPD Blue at the time. He was by far more famous than his brother at the
It
time. I
is. He
think.
was third billed under Dennis Franz's butt, but
Yes.
it's the 2 of them, and then Jenny McCarthy and Pam Anderson. I'm like, it's so weird to think that many years later, one of these people would be indirectly responsible for the deaths of a lot of children.
Yeah.
Now, and then also so then does
You don't want to listen to Jerry the King Lawler's commentary during this match.
Oh no, I
No.
The things he says are
Oh.
just fucking vile.
Oh god, I actually wasn't even like I said, I block out the commentary. Oh yeah, I wrote that this guy is the Daniel Baldwin of the Totoros. So
It's true.
and then so Diesel comes out.
The glass shatters. I thought that was funny because he's sort of a proto Austin at this point. And I had forgotten that they had
Yeah,
given
the
him the
glass
glass
shattering.
shattering entrance.
The diesel truck hits the glass, shattered diesel, Big Daddy Cole dragging the belt along with him.
I would say that he looks like the Pokemon evolution of Lorenzo Lamas.
That's great.
Or like if Lorenzo Lamas ate a Mario mushroom, he
Yeah.
would turn into Diesel.
Kids, Lorenzo Lamas played, actually, his name was Reno Reigns on the show Renegade.
That's good.
I do not think that it is accidental that it is such
Yeah.
a similar name to our friend Roman Reigns.
Yeah.
Somebody had seen Renegade.
And they're all, in a similar archetype, I guess, like
General,
yeah.
badass, has a problem with authority.
So,
whatever.
so does
at the
Diesel...
I'm sorry, go
Oh,
on.
no, you go.
I was going to say, at the time, Diesel didn't have much of a problem with authority. He was just the champ.
That's right. Yeah.
This
And,
was before all of that.
and Kevin Nash actually laments he was a badass. He was a heel. People liked him because he was a badass. He turned face and they gave him the title. And then they immediately had him singing Christmas carols in a Santa hat. And he's like, dude, like he wasn't cool anymore.
They liked him because he was dangerous.
Well, I was, the thing that he does that impresses me the most in this match, and is that Ben, you were talking in our second episode, I believe, about or maybe it was in the first episode about the archetypical moves and sort of how and what the moves say about your opponent when you do it. And Diesel's finishing move really looks like he's saying, like, I am done with this person. I am throwing this person into the garbage now.
Okay, so Diesel's finishing move, the jackknife, is a version of the powerbomb. It's basically just a powerbomb, which is a common move for like really big wrestlers to use. Because, yeah, look, you pick the guy up and it looks like you slam them as hard as you possibly can on their back.
He did about 75% of that move in this match.
That is the worst powerbomb that has ever been done.
Really?
He fucked it up completely. He was so tired and blown up by the end of the match that he could barely lift Shawn up, and he basically just drops him. And Shawn, you see, Shawn lands on his feet before he lands on his back. That is not what should happen in a powerbomb.
So let me explain a little bit about the mechanics of executing a powerbomb. For anybody who ever wanted to hear a wrestler talk about how you do this move, person giving the move hooks the guy who's taking it. He bends him over, puts his head between his knees, whatever. You get a full grip under your opponent's midsection, and you pull up. Once your opponent is upside down, it's up to the person taking the move to do a big crunch, like a big sit-up. So they're sitting up on your shoulders, and you create a full vertical distribution of weight
with your face completely in their crotch.
Oh, your face has to be completely in their crotch because that's the point of gravity. There's a lot of stuff that you just got to.
That is the point of gravity. The purpose of gravity is to pull faces into crotches.
Yes. Right?
I was just making a statement. Yeah,
I failed physics.
Yeah, no.
I passed it in the summer.
Yeah, well, two of us are doctors.
There you go. I did pass it in the summer. So, and then once the person taking the move is balanced on top, and this all happens in the course of 1 second. The person delivering the move reverses the momentum of the person taking the move and starts lowering them back. What Diesel did was the first part of that, he hoisted Shawn up, and then when Shawn did a big rotation forward, thinking, I'm going to stop on Diesel's shoulders, Diesel just sidestepped, and Shawn just rotated forward and fell on the back of his feet, which is very painful if you land on your heels like that and then fell to the floor.
Because Diesel was probably afraid he was just going to fall over if
Right.
he didn't do that.
Because if you watch this match, so there's the thing about this being a bad match. It's not a bad match in that you watch it and you're like, oh, this sucks. This is a bad match in the sense that Shawn Michaels knew he was better than Diesel in the ring. They were best friends. They're still best friends to this day. But Diesel knew that Shawn was going to be coming for him, and that Shawn's point was not to put on the best show for the crowd. Shawn's point was to show the people in power in the WWF that he was better and should be the champion and should be the top guy, even though he was losing.
Well, because Diesel seems like somebody who, what year was this match?
1995.
So,
let me just, I've
yeah.
watched this match a few times over my life. This is the first time that it became glaringly obvious to me that Diesel fucking sucks. That he was terrible as a wrestler. He couldn't do shit. There's this kind of mythology that's been built up around this match, largely because of Bret Hart. So Bret Hart came out in a shoot interview and is kind of like, oh yeah, this match sucked because Shawn went into business for himself. As Doc was just saying, Shawn just tried to make himself look better instead of doing his job, which was to make Diesel look good, because Diesel was the champ. Diesel was going over. Shawn is the heel. He should get the crowd against him and in favor of Diesel. That's not what he does. Shawn performs spectacularly, gets the crowd on his side. They're booing Diesel by the end. But there's a couple of things to think about here. One of them is that Shawn actually turned babyface the next night on Raw. So they were already gearing up sort of for Shawn to be the next babyface champ. on Raw, he takes 3 power bombs from Psycho Sid, who was his bodyguard at the WrestleMania 11 match. 3 fucking good power bombs, where I was like, fuck, he's dead.
Yeah. Sid couldn't do much, but he could throw a power bomb.
But the other thing to say is that Shawn performed the way he did in this match, because if he didn't, the match would have been horrible, because every time Diesel takes over, it's fucking shit.
Because it seems like this is there's an older style where Vince saw a huge guy and was like, you get in there and you do huge guy stuff. And it's just looks hard to be big. I've said this before, and it looks tiring, and it feels like there is a world in which this guy could be an entertaining wrestler, right? Because it seems like if you play into the strengths of being a huge dude, and the fact that he can relatively easy pick him up and throw him, like this could be a barbarian versus ninja match, right? Like this could have been really interesting. But yeah, it's not even that he looks like he's stiff, it's that he looks like he doesn't really know what to do.
He fails to press Shawn over his head at one point, and Shawn brilliantly covers for it.
Yeah.
I was a big Diesel fan as a kid. I thought he was fucking cool.
He looks cool. He was
cool. Don't think he wasn't. He just wasn't a very good wrestler at that point. He had pointed out in interviews, he thinks that when he won the WWF Championship, he had less matches under his belt than anybody else that had ever won the WWF Championship, because most of his career, his job was to stand there and look cool. And when he did get to have matches, they were often either tag matches with Shawn Michaels or, mostly they were tag matches with Shawn Michaels. If you watch the early episodes of Monday Night Raw, you'll occasionally see Diesel squash matches. And he eventually, figures out his few moves, and it looks pretty solid. But the first couple look like he really has no idea what he's doing. They give him a guy to do with whatever he wants, and clearly he doesn't know how to take it.
I think a lot of it was the Bret Hart effect. And people talk about this famous Tom McGee match where Bret made this guy look like $1 million, and Vince was like, oh my God, he's going to be the next champion. And then they saw him in the ring with someone else, and he was horrible. Bret had a match at the King of the Ring not long before, I guess about a year before WrestleMania 11, but only several months before they gave Diesel the title. He had a match with Diesel where he made him look really good. And I think they're like, oh, we could give this guy the title, and he just wasn't really that good. He doesn't even know to pull up the middle rope and push down the bottom rope to let Pam Anderson get into the ring because she's in these ridiculous heels and this ridiculous dress. He pushes down the middle rope and makes her climb over it, which is still pretty fucking high.
I mean, that's true. That shows inexperience just in the ring.
Diesel, if you're listening to this, you need to Venmo each of us $5.
Oh, man. Not only is Diesel not listening to this, he'd demand that we pay him for talking about him. I think he's very, if you hear interviews with him, he does great interviews. He's very charismatic and laid back and all that, but he's very in tune with his money, That's the main thing for him.
I think what lends a little bit of credence to Bret Hart's assessment of this match, that Shawn wasn't doing his job, is that Shawn does really know how to put himself over by losing. Mm-hmm. And we'll see that. I think we'll watch his match with Hulk Hogan eventually, and it's very evident there.
Well, it seems like he has that really key skill where he knows how to make the other guy look good.
Yeah.
He knows how to
He tried his best this time.
Yeah.
In terms of making other people look good, Bret was definitely the best. The best match of Diesel's career was his match with Bret. Not the one you were talking about, but the one later at Survivor Series 95, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Survivor Series 95 for the WWF Championship. And Diesel recognizes that was his best match, and he openly recognizes it's because he was working with Bret. Diesel was under no false pretenses that he was a great wrestler. And I think that that's important to point out. He knew that somebody had to hide his flaws. And he's not alone. There's a lot of wrestlers that needed their flaws hidden. And if you were aware of that and was working with somebody who could deal with that, you could be fine.
At the same time, Shawn's like constant selling right from go. Like before the bell even rings, he takes like a spectacular back body drop to the outside of the ring. It's exhausting. Like by the middle of the match, I'm like, oh great, another crazy dive from Shawn Michaels.
And there's a point. There's one of those jumps that looks really bad that he screws up, and like the camera like cuts to the celebrities in the front, and even Suck Totoro and the guy that my wife wishes she had actually married, they're both looking at each other like, oh my god, this is terrible.
Shawn also falls on a cameraman, which was the first of like 2 or 3 times that Shawn totally wiped out a cameraman with a dive.
He landed on like some photographers that he just picked up and threw out of the way. Like, get out of the way. Come on, I'm performing here. I don't need your awkward ass below me.
There's also the moment where Diesel does the catapult to Michaels, and it's supposed to be into the exposed buckle, but because Diesel was like too far out, Shawn hits the middle buckle instead of the top one, and it just like totally ruins the spot.
Yeah, this was not that interesting.
Nah.
I gotta say, I did enjoy. I mean, like, I enjoyed Shawn Michaels, but I guess like this got boring.
It's a bad Shawn Michaels match.
Did you watch the interview with Michaels right after the match?
I don't think so.
He's mad about losing. I believe this is the first time he references chin music, because they show the clip of him hitting Diesel with the super kick, and he says, "Yeah, I got him with a little chin music." Because when did that start being his finish?
I'm trying to think of if he said it before that. I think he did, because I remember him as a heel saying it, but I can't remember off the top of my head exactly when that started.
Listeners, if any of you know better than we do about this point, please
Wrestling
let us
fans
know.
do. Yeah.
He does in the end of the Angle match when he kicks Angle in the face.
Yeah.
You hear it in a way that it's hard to fake, and it definitely made me think about how they handle kicks.
Yeah.
Because that's something like, I guess, like punches are easier to control, I feel like, but it's hard to like convincingly kick somebody in a way that doesn't really fucking hurt.
I mean, a lot of wrestlers lean on the slapping your leg to get the sound.
Well, the real art there is hiding that, which Shawn always did very well. You know, there are very few holes in Shawn Michaels' sound game, as opposed to a lot of indie wrestlers that'll throw a million super kicks and be slapping whatever's handy that you can just see. I want somebody to do a spot where they walk up to somebody else and slap their thigh and not do a move.
I think I saw some of that in a recent Orange Cassidy match, actually, where there was some comedy match where they were just like slapping without actually throwing the moves.
That's time has come.
Any final thoughts?
Shawn Michaels is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time.
Yeah.
He knew it. He still knows it. He's involved with the developmental process now, which is exactly where he belongs. And that's pretty much all I have to say about Shawn. That his story has been told to death. I'm sure you can find other places to get his history.
One other thing to say about Shawn: I was a huge Shawn Michaels fan as a kid. I almost considered him my favorite wrestler when it seemed like Brett was out of the picture, and like I was ready for Shawn to be like my new favorite, and then the screw job happened. And, that sort of soured me on him a little bit. But also, he just was so good for so fucking long and just wouldn't get out of the fucking way or get any worse so that someone else could be, the best performer in the ring.
Like, you couldn't even resent him for overstaying his welcome because it was still justified, because it was still great to watch him.
Yeah, but yet I did resent him.
You see his match and you're like, damn it. 10, And
yet, he didn't quite stay around long enough. I wish he had, he didn't stay around long enough to, or let me put it this way. Shawn never really put over the people that I think he should have put over for the next generation. But I don't know. We could argue about that.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen him face Daniel Bryan.
Yeah.
Daniel Bryan went to Shawn Michaels' wrestling school, so he was trained, at least in the first place, by Shawn himself. But the match never really happened.
He did tap out to Bryan's finishing submission hold, but not in a match, just in like an altercation they had.
Yeah.
It would have been great to see him wrestle CM Punk.
Yeah, it never happened. And that could have happened. They were around at the same time.
Instead, he was retired by The Undertaker,
Yeah.
which was cool until he went back and had that fucking Saudi match. Because he went back and had a fucking Saudi match. He was like, oh, I'll never... If I came back, it would only be for the money. So I'm never going to come back. And then what did he do? The money got enough. Got to be large enough. And
I can't like say I'd blame a guy personally for taking $1 million or whatever they paid him to do a match. Like,
but it's just because for so long he said, you know, the reason why he won't come back is because it would only be for a payday, and then the only reason he did come back was for a payday.
Oh, kind of like he had been saying that, like, I would only come back for a payday, and that's not who I am.
Right.
Sort of
Exactly.
like I'm honorable. I wouldn't just come back for a payday.
Everybody
so it'll never
has
happen.
a price, though.
And then they were like, "What if you had 9 trucks of money?"
Yeah.
Well, you know, maybe his church needed a new roof or something, and he justified it that way.
Well, that's
he-
there is a certain point at which, like, if they're offering you enough money, you're like, well, I guess I could build a school with that. And
if we're gonna talk a little bit about the Saudi shows, like, I don't blame any of the wrestlers that go on those shows. I blame like the company for doing something so like ill morals of being in bed with the sods. But like, if you're a wrestler, even if you're a wrestler that does well, if you've got a family and they're like, well, can you do this unsavory thing for more money than you made over the last several years? I'd think, I can put all my kids through college and buy them houses. Okay, I'll just show up and do it and go home, and I can't blame somebody for that. It's so hard to actually get any power in this world through money. Like, if you can get a little bit of it, take it.
I mean, they work for the WWE to begin with, right?
Exactly. You work for the WWE as a professional wrestler because you want to make the most money. There's no real other reason to do it.
The thing that really pisses me off about the Saudi shows, besides the morals and the politics of it, is that, as we've already pointed out, MBS has very different tastes in what he wants to see in his wrestling than the rest of the wrestling fans, and they have been catering way more to what MBS wants to see on the Saudi shows than they have been catering to what the fans actually want to see, and that fucking sucks.
I'd love to see the exact numbers on that.
Well, yeah, we'll have to do a whole episode about that at some point because there's just too much. There's just too much to dig into.
Well, that's a recent thing. Yeah, there is a lot to dig into there.
This has been Contesting Wrestling. If you enjoyed this, you should listen to our other episodes. If you really love it, you should give us money on Patreon, patreon.com/contestingwrestling. You should follow us on Facebook. Well, I mean, you should follow us on Facebook, too. You should follow us on Twitter, really, at ContestingW. You should find us on Instagram. We are on pretty much all podcast platforms at this point.
Yeah, if you're listening to this on YouTube, please like and subscribe.
And yeah, I know. Follow. You can follow me, Evan Burke, at Evan Burke etc. on Twitter and Instagram. You can check out my writing at evanburke.biz.
You can find me on Twitter at Dr. Diamondfire. That's at Dr. Diamondfire. I am available for bookings, ring announcing, commentary, wrestling, other podcasts. If you want to hear me talk, just send me a message.
And you can find me at ScribeBen on Instagram and Twitter. I have a faculty page on mercy.edu and some articles up on academia.edu.
Alrighty, this has been Contesting Wrestling. Thank you very much.